So welcome, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to have Jeff Forbes here from the NSF to talk to us about writing a BPC plan for your NSF proposal. I'm Colleen Lewis. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Again, thank you, Jeff, for joining me today to talk about this initiative, and I'll hand it off to him.
So thank you so much, Colleen. And thank you all for coming. This whole broadening participation in computing initiative is really about the community and about trying to really gather the strengths of the community towards what I think is one of our greatest challenges, right? How do we effectively broaden participation in computing? And so I'm Jeff Forbes. I'm a program director in CISE, the Computer and Information Science Engineering Directorate. And I'm the cluster lead for the somewhat poorly named Education and Workforce Cluster. And it's our role to really shepherd this BPC pilot, but this is not just about me or about our cluster. But if you go to the next slide, I want to start off by thanking our colleagues, because this cannot happen without all of our directorate really working on this. And as I said, our cluster, the Education and Workforce Cluster, is currently in charge of leading this effort. On the other hand, this would not be possible were it not for all of the support that we get from leadership and our colleagues across the directorate. So in particular, I wanted to give special mention to Margaret Martinosi, the Assistant Director of CISE, and Erwin Gianchandani, who is the Deputy Assistant Director, right? So they're the people who run CISE and really been key in making the argument for this effort and really pushing it forward. And then our division director, which was Ken Calvert, and now Gurdeep Singh, has worked on this. And just throughout, we've had the support of our colleagues in CISE in making this all happen. So if we go to the next slide, why did we do this? So back in 2012, our advisory committee was looking into what we can do to actually broaden participation in computing. And I'll give more specific what we mean by that. But the idea is NSF has a role as the science and engineering federal agency for the United States of making sure that we have broad participation of all groups in the United States in the research enterprise. And there are a lot of things that have been done over the years, a lot of specific efforts, in particular, a lot of things that we fund, a lot of projects that are specifically focused on broadening participation in computing. But the thing about computing relative to other directorates is that we had some really long-standing issues of underrepresentation. And those issues were not always, in many cases, were not getting better, right? In some cases, they were even getting worse. So in order to address these issues, it's going to take the committed, focused, and sustained efforts on the part of many in the computing community. And when we say the many, that's really all of the computing community, right? It's not just that we're going to have a bunch of people like, we're not just going to get Colleen to do it all, right? We need to have a lot of the CISE community working on this. So go to the next slide. The way we're proposed to do this is that we're going to try to address broadening participation programmatically through activities that are part of our accepted and expected part of our research portfolios. So no longer is this just we're going to do broadening participation on the side, but that as you do your research, that we take all of the PIs that are doing research in CISE, so that's like 2,000 PIs, what can they do to sort of advance what we're doing in broadening participation? So in order to make those, in order to actually make this big push forward, we need to provide some, we need to have a plan for how we affect change. So first point is we're going to add some new requirements. So what we've done is we've required meaningful broadening participation in computing activities in an expanding set of CISE programs. So the thought being, if you're going to do a substantial size project, you can have some meaningful, right? Doesn't have to be large, but meaningful activity for BPC. In order to do that, we expect that not everyone's going to immediately know what the right thing to do is. So we have to provide support. And that's support for the PIs. That's why we're here having workshops like this one, and also for the reviewers. So those being size core reviews, but we want to be able to provide feedback so that we know, are you doing the right things in terms of what you propose with your BPC effort? And then once you actually have an activity, we want to be able to review what you've done, so provide feedback on the plan submitted, and then we require reporting as part of your annual reports. So go to the next slide. We have some resources that I want to point you to, which Colleen's also added in the chat. There's a FAQ which supports a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and I think is a really good place to look. And also the core program solicitation has a section which specifically talks about what goes into a broadening participation in computing plan. And Colleen will walk you through how you actually do that. But it's important to note that, you know, here the NSF has some resources for you to start out. So the next slide. So in order to understand what we think about underrepresentation, one of the first questions we often get is, what does it mean when we say broadening participation? So we are trying to encourage meaningful actions that address long-standing underrepresentation of various populations. And those populations that we've identified that we have evidence of their underrepresentation in computing relative to their participation in education more broadly. That's women, African Americans, Hispanics, American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Native Pacific Islanders, and persons with disabilities in the computing field. That's a broad set of, that doesn't include everyone, right? There are many groups you'll notice that are not included. However, that's over 70% of the US population. And it is a population that exists everywhere, right? Everywhere that where NSF gives awards has people like this. There aren't a lot of areas in the United States that don't have women, for example. So so it's not the case that you can't come up with other groups that you also want to address, right? It is perfectly reasonable to say, you know something, I want to really focus on first generation college students. You can do that, but there's almost certainly an intersection with these groups here, and you can do that in addition to the things you might do in terms of underrepresentation. And go to the next slide. And this is important because at NSF, we have our two merit review criteria, intellectual merit and broader impact. And broader impact is something that you're already doing in terms of your research project for any project you do for NSF. And that's a wide array of activities that can impact society that may or may not include broadening participation. Like broadening participation is one form of broader impacts. But if you want to do broadening participation, you need to address specific members of groups in computing, right? So the example we often see is, I'm going to do some outreach in my area, and I'm going to do a camp on robotics. That's a great idea. And that's a wonderful broader impact if you're going to do this camp for high school students. However, unless you specifically are addressing some underrepresented group, that's not necessarily broadening participation. Okay, we'll come back to this more, but that's understanding how the context of broader impacts is key. Sorry. So our vision is we're trying to get to a goal where broadening participation is just, as I said, an accepted and expected part of the research that we do. So it's going to be embedded within the CISE research community. So we want our research proposals to include a meaningful plan to broaden participation in computing. And that over time, we expect that the plans will get better and the amount of feedback that we need to provide the PIs is going to decline, because you just understand this is part of what we do. In the same way that people understand how to write a proper data management plan, we expect that people will eventually understand how to write a meaningful broadening participation plan. We have a lot that we expect that as people implement plans, that will share lessons across institutions. So it's not the case that if someone does something at University of Illinois that it's a bad idea for them to do, that Northwestern can't do the same thing, right? We expect that we're going to share. And then we are going to make sure that we have collaborations that will increase between CISE core researchers and folks like, say, Colleen, who do some CISE work, but also do a lot of work in broadening participation, right? And we're trying to make progress towards diversifying their CISE research community. And we can do that across a number of different areas. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about those areas. So the common things we often see are research activities. So you might say something like, we're going to involve some students from some underrepresented group in your research activities that you're already planning for your grant. But what I would encourage you to do is try to do that within the context of, say, some existing programs that might exist, or to make sure that the outcomes for those research activities for those students are as good as possible for broadening participation. So one example, for example, is the CRAWP has the DREW program, so Distributed Research Experiences for Undergraduates. And so if you follow the links that Colleen has put in the chat, you can see how you can partner with DREW to host 2 RU students from underrepresented groups each summer. You can plan to do that as part of your project. And CRAWP works with Access Computing, which works with students with disabilities, and IMCF, which works with African-American students in computing. Another example of something that we see a lot of are outreach activities. So you might say, I'm going to go to a local school and talk to them about computer science. But if you're going to broaden participation, again, it's a good idea to work with existing programs. That might be something within your institution, but it might also be the Girl Scouts have resources available and are interested in having computer science for their troops. And there are Girl Scouts in every single, can't remember the zip code or congressional district, but basically they're everywhere. So you can, so that will allow you to tap into and work with an existing activity so that way you don't have to do the recruitment, and also that will help with some of the evaluation and assessment you might want to do. But I think while you might jump to research activities or outreach, it's important to also think about what you can do as a faculty member that you might already know how to do. So you work in a department, you can do some departmental development. You can look at, like, how can you improve the diversity and inclusion of your department? You can, Command It, the Center for Minorities and Disabilities in Information Technology, they have an award they have a retention award. And it's really powerful, I would say, to gather the data on the differential retention you have across demographic groups. Because you might find that you lose people at different stages. And once you understand what you're doing, you can help address that. And faculty development is another big one, right? If you're a faculty, you can just think about, what can I do within my courses to create better practices? So NCWIT 101 has a whole bunch of things that you can do as a faculty member to learn about BPC and employ that in your courses. So what I like to point out about faculty development and department development is these are things within your sphere of influence and within your sphere of expertise. So you can work on these, whereas you might have lots of ideas about what to do for middle schoolers, but you might not necessarily have the expertise or ability to always integrate into a middle school. All right, next slide, please. We strongly encourage you to partner and with any kind of project or entity that has some experience with BPC activities. Again, you don't have to do this alone. And we fund 8 different alliances that are meant to be national resources for trying to broaden participation in computing. And happy to answer any questions about these 8 alliances. Each one, they span different underrepresented groups, and they also span different parts of pathways to computing careers. Right? You might see something like Real CS, which focuses on high school computer science, ESEP, which focuses on K-12 through community college. Then you have IMCS, which is focused on primarily getting African Americans to go into and through PhD, CRAWP focus on PhD, et cetera. So there's a lot there. In addition, if you're going to do K-12, there's a CS for All set. There are a whole bunch of projects that we fund in a CS for All consortium, which brings them together as a community. And the CS for All Teachers.org is a online community for teachers, so that provides a ready space that you can go to if you want to work with teachers in terms of your any kind of outreach that you're doing. All right, next slide. So we've been doing this now for a while. So we've been doing this certainly when we first started in 2019. We started having a lot of proposals, including BPC plans. One of the things that we found is we wanted to determine what is a meaningful BPC plan. Well, a meaningful BPC plan should have an evidence-based, sustained response to some well-articulated aspect of broadening participation. And it's key that's one aspect. We're not expecting you to solve all of society's or more even the computing community's problems, right? If you decide that what is most interesting to you is you want to address how students go from, how you don't want to lose students who go from master's to PhD, and you're finding that your female students are disproportionately leaving at that point, that's something you can do, right? You don't have to go down and also address K-12. But the other thing we found is, in order to create a plan and execute that plan, we understand that many CISE PIs are not really going to be in that position right now. So we're having workshops like this one, but we also take a stages of development way of thinking about these plans. So it's not about good or bad. It's you might be getting started or evolving, or hopefully we want to move everyone towards impactful. So what makes for a meaningful plan? There are 5 elements. So context. So a plan needs to say what's happening at your local or institutional context, right? So what are the demographics of your institution or department, and what are the broad goals of your activities? So you found, again, going to the example of looking at students going from master's to PhD, you say, well, here's the demographics of our master's and PhD students, and here's why we want to make some changes. Then you have some intended population. So you need to say which one of those groups that I listed earlier are the ones that you're trying to focus on, and what the particular level is that you're going to focus on. Then you have actual activities. So oftentimes people just want to list a bunch of activities without the context and intended population. I think everyone tends to think that they have something that they're going to do. But key thing is for every PI in your every PI and co-PI has to have some kind of role in some activity. Each PI does not have to be involved in all the activities. You can have activities at different institutions, but they all need to be involved. We also want to know, how do you know you're going to do this well? And there are 2 ways in that. One is, what's your preparation? So do you have prior BPC experience? Or even if you don't, what's your preparation or training activities that you're going to have, so that when students come into your lab, that they're likely to have a good experience? And also, we want to know, how do you know that you're actually successful? What's your plan for evaluation? What's your plan for measurement of the outcomes of your proposed activity? So next slide. So what we've done is right now, you have to have a plan at the time of award in a meaningful plan for any medium or large proposal submitted to our CISE core programs, cyber physical systems, or secure and trustworthy computing. And you are, the solicitation states that you have to include a 1 to 3 page description of your plan under the supplementary documents, and that we will provide feedback on your plans. The way this process works is you submit with your this plan submitted with your proposal. There'll be currently we have a panel of BPC experts who review the plans prior to the core panels, and then the CISE reviewers, the core panel reviewers, use those BPC reviews to inform discussion. It's important to note that the plan, the quality of your plan, or even the existence of the plan does not affect your rating that you get, nor does it affect your award recommendation. However, you do have to have a meaningful BPC plan at the time of award. And meaningful is what we talked about before. Like, we looked at those 5 categories. We expect that you are going to address all of those in some substantial way in order to have a meaningful plan. One question that also comes up is, so I propose this plan. Like, how am I supposed to pay for these things? And it's important to note that you propose what you want to do in your BPC plan. And the costs for those activities are separate from the stated budget limit for the proposals. If you are awarded and you need extra resources to carry out those BPC activities, you will negotiate that at award time. And that could be something small. If it's something large, then it's going to be more of a negotiation. But this means that if you have a $1.2 million limit, that the BPC activities can be on top of that $1.2 million. It's not a supplement. This will happen at award time. So I mentioned that you don't have to submit a plan when you submit your proposal, but we highly encourage you to. And for the most part, people do. This past year, we had about 90% of projects submitted a plan at proposal time. And we highly encourage you to, because you don't want to start from scratch at award time of trying to make a meaningful plan. How did they do? Well, we'd like to see everyone having an impactful plan. Right now, that's not the case, right? We only see 7% have an impactful. So 60% are at the lowest level, so getting started. But we're early on, providing feedback. So we expect that people are going to get better. 33% involving, 7% impactful. And we're trying to provide support and figure out what we can do in order to support you. So if we go to the next slide, why were so many projects considered getting started? So one common thing is, if you just list a number of activities but don't tell us what the PIs are going to do, that's not really a plan. You're not telling us what your BPC plan is and how each PI is going to be involved. Measurement is a place where a lot of projects leave it out entirely or don't sufficiently address it. So you need to explain how that you know that you're making some kinds of progress. You need to tell us what your context is. So, and where possible, tell us what that local context is. You don't need to repeat to us that women are underrepresented in computing. We kind of know that, but it'd be nice to know what the particular situation is at your institution or locally, so that we can understand why you're trying to do this. Novelty is overrated or completely unnecessary when we're talking about broadening participation. If you have something within your institution, some existing effort, you probably have in your college some like existing efforts, RU programs, outreach efforts, diversity inclusion offices, all like teaching centers. Build upon those existing efforts. Build upon best practices. You don't need to invent something new. we do encourage people to come up with new ideas and new implementations, but you don't have to. And it often doesn't work well. As I mentioned before, a big problem is confusing broader impacts and broadening participation. Make sure the activities that you propose are actually going to address underrepresented groups. Another thing is, it's really good to have your proposal that says, here are all these female graduate students that I've had. But give us some context on that and explain, like, did you just have a bunch of, like, did you have 2 females that worked in your research group, but like the rest of your department had like, some multiple, twice as many? Like, what is happening, and what were the particular recruiting and mentoring strategies that you used so that they were successful? Next slide. So one thing we want to do is we also want to provide support, and Colleen will address this. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that this doesn't all just lie on each individual PI. Now, for NSF's point of view, while proposals come from institutions, NSF does not necessarily have relationships with departments or units. We get things, you submit your plan with your proposal, but we understand that faculty live in units, so we want to encourage their units to develop departmental plans to which faculty can contribute. And that helps with this measurement part, this assessment, and also to hopefully sustain what's happening. Okay. Am I answering questions now or later?
We've just got one in the chat, so maybe you want to take that one. So,
Claire, my old sort of office mate. Hi Claire, how you doing? They're not budgeted at all until award time. Yes, so you do not have to put in your BPC activities until award time.
So they don't go in the official NSF budget that your sponsored projects office will submit.
Yes, they will definitely put it in as a real budget amendment. You will revise your budget to put this in, but you can put it in beforehand, but you're not required to, because it's not subject to the limit. But you should not, if the limit is $1.2 million, do not submit a $1.3 million project, because then it could get returned without review. And that is not what you want.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. And folks, if you've got other questions, feel free to type those into the chat as we go. Like I said in the beginning, I'm Colleen Lewis from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I want to walk you through some of these resources that we have on BPCnet. Okay, so BPCnet has resources for writing project BPC plans. That's what Jeff was mainly talking about. These are the ones you submit to the NSF, and departmental BPC plans. That was the last slide that Jeff talked about. And I want to talk about the differences between these 2 documents, because I think that's a common point of confusion. So on the left-hand side of the slide, I've got these NSF, or these project BPC plans. Those are submitted to the NSF, 1 to 3 pages, describe what each PI is going to do, and the goal is for each PI to do meaningful and impactful BPC activities. Okay, these department plans are not submitted to the NSF. You can submit those to bpcnet.org and have a team of BPC reviewers review and verify your plan. These are 2 pages, and they're going to describe the activities within the department as a whole. And really the goal is to help departments create institutional change by really organizing and creating synergy across their activities. Okay, so these are not required for the project or the NSF plans, but we think that these are going to be a helpful tool for creating institutional change. And before I walk you through the various bpcnet.org resources that I think will help you, whether you're interested in submitting to the NSF and creating a project plan or the department plan, I want to talk you through one more piece, which is that actually a lot of departments find it helpful to create an internal document that helps their PIs write BPC plans. And so this is not a submitted document. It's any number of pages, just an internal document that your department uses. It can describe how faculty get involved. So if your department has that 2-page department plan, then it has this internal document that's like, oh, if you want to do activity 1 from our plan, like here's the text that you should copy and paste into your plan. And the goal really is to make it easier for faculty to get involved in BPC and to put that in their NSF proposal. Okay, I wanted to provide that high-level overview, but what we're going to talk about now is resources for mainly project BPC plans. These are the 1 to 3 page ones submitted to the NSF. Okay, so on bpcnet.org, you're going to find resources like rubrics and templates for project plans, department plans, events like today's webinar. The video will be posted. We've got an FAQ there and also a link to the NSF FAQ. You can submit your plan to BPCnet. That's only for departmental plans, not for the ones you submit to the NSF. You can get some curated BPC advice, and then there's awesome graduation and actually K-12 data available for you to download. So I'm going to walk you through some of these pieces. So for the project plan on BPC, so this is the 1 to 3 page document that you're going to be submitting to the NSF. We've got online templates for you to use that we think are going to help you be successful, the NSF solicitation, and then the rubric. So on the left-hand side of this, I've got the project template, and on the right-hand side, I've got that NSF solicitation that Jeff already showed you. And so what we did on the BPC and BPCnet.org backend is take the text of the NSF solicitation and all the advice that we've seen come out about how to do impactful BPC work, and we translated that into a project template and also a rubric. This project template is a little bit tricky because the PIs on your project can do different things. One person could revise their curriculum, one person could do K-12 outreach. So let me first say that the template is not required. The activities of each PI can be overlapping or completely disjoint. And if the PIs on your project have disjoint activities, we recommend that you use the template once per activity. So for every PI that's doing their own thing, use the template once. Again, template's not required. I want to reinforce some of the things that Jeff said. So I think faculty often assume that BPC activity always involves outreach to K-12 students and sending students to diversity-focused conferences. And these are totally great activities, but you have to ask yourself, do these take advantage of the faculty members' skills and spheres of influence? If I have never worked with K-12 students, it would be a heavy lift to become competent, to engage K-12 students in a meaningful way to be effective for BPC. Similarly, as a faculty member at an institution, I get to shape policy, I get to shape the norms and culture and pedagogy within my class. And I should try and take advantage of those places where I'm in a position of power to change culture, practices, and policies towards the goals of BPC. So I've highlighted here 4 activities that I think are really, or actually 6 activities that I think are really helpful for BPC and take advantage of faculty members' spheres of influence and skills. So improving your pedagogy and improving your curriculum. So pedagogy is how you teach, curriculum is what you teach. We have resources and explanations on bpcnet.org for why both of those things, which actually will benefit all students, there's research to suggest those activities benefit all students and additionally benefit students who are underrepresented in computing because of their race or gender. And so there are things we can do for all students that are specifically designed for broad participation. I think a really important thing for us to think about is our departmental policies. So at many institutions across the country, to be a successful computer science major, you need to have had high school computer science experience. But the problem is access to high school computer science experience is unequally distributed by race because we have generally quite segregated K-12 schooling system in our country. And so the extent to which my program at my institution requires that someone had access to computer science in their high school means that I am systematically disadvantaging Black, Latinx, and Native students who are less likely to have access to that. And I think particularly as public institutions, but even previously when I worked at a private institution, I think it's a reasonable expectation that we don't amplify existing racial inequity. And so thinking about taking a hard look at our educational practices and policies to see if we can identify ways to not amplify existing racial inequity. Jeff mentioned expanding research opportunities. You can partner with Drew. And then even people don't think about this, but monitoring BPC data and doing a good job of analyzing that in and of itself can be a BPC activity. Okay, on bpcnet.org, you'll find resources. So I'm on the resources tab, and we've got advice for selecting BPC activities. We've broken BPC activities and hand-curated set of resources that might be helpful to you in these categories. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that, we are always updating the resources on BPCnet as we're getting feedback from folks about how to make them more helpful for them in their goals of doing effective BPC. For example, just today we posted resources on faculty retention. And so you can check out on bpcnet.org under resources, we've got that. That previous slide just had like a uncontextualized list of activities, but you can see a one-sentence description of what each of those categories include. And then you'll find for each of the activities, so here under resources, I've selected expanding research opportunities, that's in the bottom right. And then you can see we've got a description with some research supporting why expanding research opportunities is impactful for BPC. And then we have 4 concrete resources that can help you make and design an effective BPC activity related to expanding research opportunities. In that context part of your plan, you're going to identify the goal for your BPC activity. And because we know it's difficult to know what you might put in that, we've provided 37 example goals. And again, these are subdivided by those activities, that structure of activities before. Okay, now I want to give you the way to cheat to create a really impactful BPC activity. Because like we assume that that's everyone's goal is to do this and do this well, but we know that you might not have time or expertise to figure out what the right thing is to do. So I want to talk you through the sort of shortest path towards impactful BPC activities. The first is getting that context data. So on bpcnet.org/statistics, there's 2 tools. One can give you access to your K-12 enrollment data in your state, so that you can compare the demographics of your institution, say, to the demographics in the state. There's also IPEDS data, so that's the national data storage for computing degrees or any college and university degrees that are granted. They get reported to IPEDS, and then we've got a tool where you can download some historical data from your institution. Right now that goes through 2016, and as more data is available through various paths, we'll be updating that as soon as that's available. But it can give you a helpful point in time as you're working with your institutional research to get more relevant institutional internal data. Okay, so you can grab some data from your institution or your state here for your context section. And then at the link that I've pasted in the chat, we've got some example BPC activities. And these follow the template from bpcnet.org. And what they do is they lay out all the content that you need for each of those pieces. So what is the research base that says that this is going to be an impactful BPC activity? We tried to make them specific enough so that you can include them in your BPC plan, just copy and paste them, and then you'll know the steps that you need to take. It's really important. Jeff mentioned at the beginning, that preparation piece, PI preparation. How do we know you're going to do a good job? And each of these activities includes a detailed set of preparation that you need to do so that you're ready to engage with this. For example, one of the BPC activities, example activities, is working with the Girl Scouts, and you can't plausibly say that you're going to be able to do this if you haven't reached out to the local Girl Scout organization and started the paperwork for your background check to be able to work with the Girl Scout troops. Okay, so you can download data from bpcnet.org/statistics. You can copy and paste one of these example plans and then make sure that you accomplish that preparation. Similar to BPCnet, we are always trying to add more example activities. If you have any feedback about the site or any of these example activities, you can email me directly. There's also a contact form on bpcnet.org. What we want to empower the community, even those who haven't been involved in BPC activities before, to be able to do meaningful and impactful BPC activities, because that's what it's going to take to really address this long-standing pattern of underrepresentation. Okay, we're going to one more thing. You're like, Colleen, I still want more support and help for creating my BPC plan for my NSF proposal. There's something I want to do, you know, and I really want it to be reviewed well, and I want to be impactful. You can sign up for BPC Expert Consulting. So the NSF has funded the Computing Research Association to make BPCnet.org, and also to fund some ongoing consulting to help departments and PIs as they're trying to craft plans for impactful BPC work. So I've got the link there, and I'll paste it in the chat, along with some other helpful links. And you can sign up for BPC Consulting. You can bring a draft plan or meet with the consultant to start brainstorming ideas and what that might look like, and get customized support. Okay, so this last slide is just some important links that we went over, and I've also pasted those in the chat. And for our video, folks watching the video, those are below the video. And maybe I'll start you off, Jeff, with a question about scope. How do I know as a PI, and I'm submitting my grant, how do I know what's the right scope?
So we don't make any determination about scope. Like, you get to, you can decide that you want to do something focused and small. So like something in particular for 1 or 2 students or faculty members, or you can try to do something where you're going to give a lecture to 1,000 high school students. You get to decide what that scope is. You just need to make appropriate measurement to try to determine, have you made meaningful progress given that scope.
And I think one piece in the resources that are on BPCnet is an emphasis in that measurement, both in formative evaluation and summative evaluation. So you're going to need a report to the NSF, the number of students who were served and things like that, potentially, but you also want to collect data to say, how can I improve this activity the next time I do it? And that's going to be a component of that measurement. And the NSF is going to be excited to see that you are collecting data that's going to help you be even more impactful in year 2 of your grant, even more impactful in year 3 of your grant.
And I'll also say, at the review time, one common refrain is reviewers saying, not just quantity, but quality. Like, what is the actual meaningfulness of the experience, not just, I'm going to work with 3 students from this underrepresented group.
Jeff, should folks submit a BPC plan for things other than SaTC medium large, CPS medium and large, or core medium and large? Should they submit BPC plans with their other NSF grants?
You should never submit something that is not explicitly requested in the solicitation, because if you add some document to your supplemental documents that is not requested, again, that can be viewed as you're trying to get past page limits, and we can return it without review. So the only other program where we have a BPC plan is the Expeditions program. That is a little different with how that works. And important to note that in the Expeditions program, it actually, it is a component of the program. So that means it actually counts towards your rating. In the same way that, for example, if you do submit a CS for All proposal, the broadening participation component is, it's a actual review criteria. Oh yes, and very good point. There are no more large proposals this year, so just mediums.
I want to really encourage you to let your colleagues know about these example BPC activities and the BPC Plan consulting resources. We know that folks might do some of this at the last minute, and we want to try and spread it out as much as possible. If we can help your colleagues get their BPC plan ready, even before they finish the text of their grant. Common question, Jeff. Does my BPC plan activities, do those need to relate in any way to my NSF proposal?
No, they do not have to relate in any way. A lot of people choose to have them relate, but that is not a requirement.
And obviously my NSF grant has to be coherent, and the PIs are all working towards sort of a similar set of aims. Do my PIs need to be working towards the same BPC goals within their activities?
Absolutely not. You, for example, you have a collaborative proposal between Georgia Tech and University of Illinois, Georgia Tech people could do something in Atlanta, the people in Illinois could do something in Champaign that are completely unrelated.
And even within a single institution, are we welcome to do completely different activities?
Yep, you can do completely different activities. One person can do an activity that's related to the departmental plan. The other PI can do something that's completely of their own interest. So nope, there's no expectation of coherence in the BPC plan. Reviewers tend to like something that's at least moderately coherent. So part of that is that you just want to make sure that what you're proposing is practical.
And I think something where each of the PIs have a thing that they have been doing and are passionate about, and then they are planning to continue doing that and maybe expand what they're doing. I think that when it would be incoherent and not connected would be more compelling if there's a track record than if just no one could agree. But we really want people to do the BPC activities that they find most fulfilling. There's a lot of work to do, but none of it needs to be novel, and no one needs to do all of it. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really are excited to work with you to achieve our national goals of broadening participation in computing. It's going to take all of us. And so we're excited for you to share this with your colleagues and to do really impactful work. Awesome. Jeff, thanks so much.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for taking the time. We're excited, are really excited about all the effort that everyone's putting into this. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come to this webinar.
Okay, we have a set of example BPC activities, and we really want to try and expand these. But let me walk you through what they look like right now. So you can see we've got 6 of them, and you can click on a single one and it'll take you down to that item within the Google Doc. So here you can see adopt pure instruction curriculum. That's a particular type of way of teaching your course. At the top, we have like a sort of one sentence sort of abstract of it because we figured that might be helpful for reviewers. And then throughout, you can see that we've used the template from bpcnet.org. So we describe the context and the goals. Here you can see the text in red shows what information you should be gathering. Our goal is to reduce DFW rates. That's the student number of the rates of students receiving a D, an F, or withdrawing from the course. And we want those to be consistent across demographic groups, disaggregated by race, gender, and first generation college status. And here you can see we're focused on first generation college status. That can't be the only group we focus on, but as a department or as individual PIs, as long as we're including one of the groups that the NSF identifies, we can also include other groups. So here then the activity motivation explains the reason why this activity of adopting peer instruction in your classroom is likely to benefit students who are underrepresented in computing because of their race and gender. The intended population, so here again we've got a little bit more for the PI to fill out. What class are they teaching? Who, last semester, what were the demographics of that course? Here you can see that we've included an activity to email the Women in Computing group, and this could be a strategy to encourage students to enroll in the course if it's an elective. Okay, this strategy, that's really the nuts and bolts of it. Here's the activity content. What are you actually going to do? Here they haven't requested any budget because it's not necessary here. And then preparation. I think if there's any section for someone using these example activities that this is the most important is this preparation and section. So here you need to go to pureinstruction4cs.org. That's a resource that has a bunch of curriculum on it, and you need to find one that works for your class, and you need to have looked through it to make sure not just it seems like it will work for your class, but it really will. They have a bunch of helpful resources for getting started and for updating your syllabus. We want to make sure that you take those actions before you commit yourself to doing this in your BPC plan. And then really important, the PI in the annual report is going to report on those DFW rates, the rates at which students get a D, an F, or withdraw from the course, exam performance, and final grades disaggregated by those groups. And each one of our example activities has the same structure. So NCWIT 101 is an awesome self-paced course where you can learn about recruitment and retention and create a plan for your institution about how you're going to do that. Volunteering for NC Wood Aspirations in Computing. This one's cool because it's pretty easy to get started. And I think if you jump down to the preparation section for all of them, that can be helpful. So the PI is registered as a volunteer to read applications, has contacted the lead volunteer for a local award event, and they've discussed with the department chair the idea of offering a scholarship. Okay, so those are the key things. Really focus in on that preparation. Those are the key things you need to do before you copy and paste it into your grant.